Hello, and welcome to another episode of Better Late Than Never, a series where I play old games that I never got around to playing, and talk about what we can learn from them today. Now, in the last episode on Earthworm Jim, I noted that I wanted to tackle another Sega Genesis game, and I felt like there was more we could learn from this era. So today, we're going to look at the somewhat culty classic, Ecco the Dolphin. Now, I have a lot of things I want to clarify and expand on from last episode, so let's dive into it. You get it because, never mind. Here are my three biggest takeaways from Ecco the Dolphin. Number one, there's so much depth to the Genesis library. Okay, no, that's the last of the water puns, I'm sorry. Anyways, like I said, I want to clarify something from the last episode. I kept referring to Earthworm Jim as a Sega game, and in retrospect, that was kind of a misleading thing to say. The game wasn't developed by Sega, and it even came out on the Super Nintendo shortly after it hit the Genesis. But what I actually meant by Sega games, quote-unquote, was games that defined the Genesis, and in turn, Sega's image. As I said, Earthworm Jim's edgy cartoon style lined up with a lot of different games from the system. Ecco the Dolphin, on the other hand, is completely different than that. Ecco, which was actually published by Sega, is peaceful and atmospheric, with none of that Sonic-esque attitude. Playing this has helped me kind of widen how I view this era now. It wasn't that Sega represented edgy counterculture, it's more that the Genesis was home for experiences that gamers had never seen before. Ecco is an incredibly unique game, even by today's standards, and I think it's games like this and Earthworm Jim that really keep the Genesis in our memories. For a lot of gamers, the Genesis was a portal to so many new worlds and ways of thinking about play. And in that regard, I want to bring us to my next takeaway, which is that, number two, this is almost kind of the blueprint for modern indie games. Now look, Ecco isn't a masterpiece, it's really a somewhat clumsy 2D adventure that can be a real chore to get through, but playing it today, there's something weirdly modern about it. It reminded me of games like Song of the Deep or Abzu more than anything from this Genesis era. Ecco doesn't conform to standard 2D game design of its time. Rather than being focused on action, it's a game completely about exploring the boundless ocean. The challenges come more in the form of mini puzzles and mazes. You use your dolphin abilities to navigate and reach new areas, almost kind of like a modern Metroidvania, and in that way, it feels like today's indie games owe a debt to this game. It showed the world a different way to approach gaming, one that was peaceful, reflective, and devoid of violence. It's a meditative experience that made my mind wander to walking simulators like Firewatch. Games where you just wander your environment, following a narrative, but rarely feeling restricted. Ecco is completely linear, but the ability to dive and weave around long, empty expanses of oceans while atmospheric music plays is freeing in a way that feels ahead of its time. And don't forget that that's kind of a running theme that we noticed in our last episode. Okay, let's keep these positive vibes going and round this one out on a high note for once. Number three, old graphics stand the test of time. In a bunch of previous episodes, I've had a lot to say about how poorly 3D games tend to age visually. I've noted issues with everything from Star Fox to Half-Life, games that once looked cutting edge and now fall apart with age. But I'm kind of having the opposite reaction with Ecco and Earthworm Jim. These games are gorgeous. In fact, they feel like they're only getting prettier with age. While I played Sonic endlessly as a kid, the visual quality never really crossed my mind, but the older I've gotten, the more I noticed how intricately detailed and vibrant these games tend to be. I think system limitations might have to do with this. That is, designers had to find really innovative ways to approach art design working around their limits, like color. Rather than pushing for realism, these games focus on pure stylization to stand out. In Ecco's case, that means trading in realistic water effects for hypnotic blue gradients. Look, it's great that there are less limits in today's games, which give us so many new ways to approach art, but limits are also such an interesting part about playing these old games. The solutions artists and developers found to work around these roadblocks are often fascinating and beautiful. In 20 years, I think Ecco will still be a pretty sight, while Half-Life 2's realistic detail will be more and more cringeworthy. Alright, well I hope you've enjoyed this mini Sega Genesis throwback arc, but where should we go next? See the list of games I'm tackling in the description, and let me know which ones you want to see next in the comments. Whatever you pick, I promise it will have 100% less dolphins in it. Sorry, aquatic enthusiasts.